Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Zhang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. When I was in medical school, most physicians worked in private practice or in physician-owned settings. Physician-owned practices often contracted with hospitals, but they operated independently. Over the last few decades, we've seen a steady decline in those physician-owned practices. According to the AMA, 2016 was the first year in which fewer than half of practicing physicians had an ownership stake in their practice. By 2018, only 46% of physicians were owners, while 47% were employees and 7% were independent contractors. That really marked the first year where there were more physicians who were employees than were owners. This shift toward employment, whether by hospitals, large healthcare systems, or corporate entities like private equity, really accelerated during the COVID pandemic. According to a report published by Avalere Health in June 2022, 73.9% of physicians in the United States were employed. That breaks down to 52.1% employed by hospitals or health systems and 21.9% employed by corporate entities. And between 2019 and 2022 alone, 36,200 physician practices were acquired. I think those are some startling statistics. And personally, I don't think that really bodes well for the profession of being a physician. I started my medical career in a physician-owned practice with the goal of becoming a partner. Unfortunately, at some point, it became clear that equal partnership wasn't likely, so I ended up leaving that position and moved to a hospital-employed role. That was definitely not a place for me to thrive. I left there after 2 years and took some time to figure it out, but more recently, I've really carved a less traditional path, working a mix of 1099 independent contractor roles, as well as part-time W-2 employee roles. In today's episode, I want to break down the advantages and drawbacks of both options to help you decide what might work best for you. Let's start by defining what it actually means to be W-2 versus 1099. W-2 and 1099 really just refer to tax forms, specifically the form you receive in January for the income that you earned the prior year. If you receive a W-2 form, then you're a W-2 employee. Your employer withholds federal, state, and possibly city taxes from your paycheck. They also provide workspace, tools, equipment, and generally control your schedule. W-2 employees, especially those who work full-time, typically qualify for benefits like health insurance. I'll talk more about benefits later. If you receive a 1099 NEC, NEC actually stands for non-employee compensation. And that means you're really considered an independent contractor. You likely need to submit invoices before you actually get paid. And you're responsible for paying all taxes on your income. On the flip side, contractors usually have more control over their schedules. While the difference sounds like it's all about taxes, the core legal distinction is really about control. A W-2 employee performs services under the employer's control. What you do, where you do it, and how you do it to some extent. The employer sets hours and provides the tools and workplace. On the other hand, a 1099 independent contractor is by definition a self-employed individual who performs services for a client and therefore retains control over how the work is done. You are essentially running your own business. You choose how, when, and sometimes even where you work. You can have multiple contracts at once and invoice for payment. That being said, in terms of day-to-day clinical practice, the actual work often looks very similar, in my opinion. A W-2 hospitalist and a 1099 hospitalist are doing the same clinical tasks. The differences really show up mainly in the finances, things like taxes and benefits, but also to some extent in autonomy. Let's start with income and compensation structure. Many W-2 physicians have a base salary with a production bonus. Often, there's a guaranteed salary for the first 1 to 3 years once you start working. When the period of the guaranteed salary is over, There's usually some sort of performance-based compensation. Some W-2 physicians are paid per shift or per diem. Those who work a W-2 job receive regular paychecks. It could be every 2 weeks, bi-monthly, or monthly. And there may also be quarterly or annual bonuses. As a W-2 employee, your employer will withhold taxes from your paycheck. That includes federal, state, and possibly local taxes. It also includes FICA taxes, which means your Social Security and Medicare taxes. Your employer may also withhold retirement contributions, FSA contributions, as well as the employee share of things like health insurance premiums or vision coverage and dental coverage. The other important thing to note is that when you're a W-2 employee, your employer pays the employer's share of FICA taxes. In contrast, compensation for a 1099 contractor is whatever is negotiated, but it's more likely to be per diem, per shift, or per procedure. While someone may work as a 1099 contractor for an extended period of time, I know I've been working the same 1099 job for several years now. It's more common that a contractor is hired to fill a particular need until that need is fulfilled or an employee is hired for that position. Many physicians who work as a 1099 contractor are doing what is referred to as locums work. Locums refers to the Latin phrase locum tenens, which literally means to hold the place up, and typically refers to a person who temporarily fulfills the duties of another professional, often on a contractual, short-term basis. As a 1099 contractor, you usually submit invoices or timesheets to receive payment. No taxes are withheld, so you are responsible for paying for both employee and employer portions of FICA taxes. That's your Social Security and Medicare taxes. This means that your Social Security tax is 6.2% higher up to the annual limit, and your Medicare tax is 1.45% higher with no limit. Because of this, 1099 compensation needs to be higher to offset the extra tax burden and your additional expenses. To avoid penalties, contractors should pay estimated quarterly taxes. Remember, I'm not an accountant, and I'm certainly not your accountant, so you want to consult with your accountant on how much you should be paying in those quarterly estimates. Now let's talk about tax deductions. W-2 employees have very limited deductions compared to 1099 contractors, who have substantial opportunities for business deductions. Business owners can deduct things like home office expenses, professional development, dues, fees, equipment, supplies, and more. For example, as a W-2 employee, if your employer doesn't reimburse you for your professional membership, board certification fees, or DA license, you can't deduct it from your taxes, even though you paid for them in order to work your job. As a 1099 contractor, you're able to write off your professional expenses. The IRS allows deduction for any business expense that's considered ordinary, meaning common and accepted in your trade, as well as necessary, meaning helpful and appropriate for your business. This means that you can write off attending a medical conference, even if it's in Europe, or purchasing medical equipment like surgical loupes or a stethoscope. You can also write off medical scrubs and your white coat, although you can't write off a suit or other clothing, even if you wear it to work. To write off clothing, the IRS requires that clothing be essential for performing your work and that is not suitable for everyday wear. A suit or dress clothes can be worn outside of work for personal, social, and other non-business occasions, so that's considered a personal expense. While I've certainly worn scrubs for purposes outside of work, scrubs are considered specific medical wear and can even be considered a uniform, so buying scrubs does qualify as a business deduction. You can also deduct the embroidery of your scrubs to put your name or any logo that you want. One way to think about this is that W-2 employees receive the benefits that their employer chooses to provide. 1099 independent contractors create and fund their own benefits and can maximize whatever the IRS allows. As a W-2 employee, you may have benefits like health insurance, dental insurance, and even a vision plan. You may have access to an employer-sponsored retirement account, and it's possible that your employer even provides matching contributions to the account. Other typical benefits include paid time off and sick leave. You can have reimbursement for specific professional expenses like a stipend for continuing education or access to flexible spending accounts. Your employer may also offer you specific discounts. As an ophthalmologist, I've previously been able to buy eyeglasses from the optical shop at cost as one of my benefits working for the ophthalmology office. As a 1099 contractor, you can negotiate for specific benefits for your clients, the people that you're providing a service, but you're very unlikely to have any benefits package that looks anything like that of a W-2 employee. You will likely need to set up your own retirement account, like a solo 401k or SEP IRA. While you won't get an employee match, you can often contribute more annually because you contribute as both the employee and the employer. So basically, you're providing that employee match. You can think of yourself when you're an independent contractor as your own employer, and so you're funding your own employee match. You're likely responsible for your own health insurance and possibly even your malpractice insurance. There are locums agencies that may offer assistance with insurance, more commonly malpractice insurance, but there are some that offer health insurance options as well. W-2 employment often comes with a greater sense of job security. But in practice, both W-2 and 1099 positions can be let go without cause, as long as the contractual notice period is followed. In my own experience, W-2 notice periods tend to be a bit longer, either 60 or 90 days, compared to 30 days for 1099 contracts. Another important distinction, W-2 employees may qualify for unemployment benefits, whereas 1099 contractors do not. As you can see, there are meaningful trade-offs. The pros of being a W-2 employee include employer-provided benefits, simpler taxes, certain legal protections, and potentially more stability. The downsides include less flexibility and autonomy, limited deductions, and sometimes a lower ceiling on earnings. The pros of being a 1099 contractor include increased flexibility, more autonomy, the potential for higher earnings, and significant tax deductions. But this comes with the responsibility of self-employment taxes and the administrative burden of invoicing, arranging insurance, and managing your own benefits. A word of caution here. Some companies will treat workers like employees, but pay them as contractors to avoid taxes and benefits. The IRS has clear guidelines to determine proper work classification, and misclassification carries serious penalties for the company, not for the physician. As for me, I spent the last few years working part-time as a W-2 employee while also working as a 1099 contractor. Because Social Security tax only applies up to an annual earnings limit, my goal is generally to make more than that limit in my W-2 job. That means I don't pay the employer portion of Social Security tax on my 1099 income. In 2025, that limit was $176,100, which increased to $184,500 in 2026. With my 1099 income, I can fund my solo 401k and deduct business expenses that weren't covered by my W-2 role. When I was let go from my previous W-2 position, my 1099 work provided financial buffer, so I didn't have an extended period without income. I was even lucky that I was able to pick up more shifts right at the time where my other position was ending. Choosing between W-2 employment and 1099 contracting isn't about what option is better. It's about which one aligns with your goals, your risk tolerance, your need for flexibility, and how hands-on you want to be with taxes and benefits. W-2 employment can offer stability and simplicity. 1099 contracting can offer autonomy and financial upside. I've really found that a hybrid approach delivers the best of both worlds. As you evaluate your next job opportunity, look beyond the salary offered. Consider the tax implications, benefits, flexibility, and your long-term financial plan. The right structure can make a meaningful difference in your wealth-building strategy as well as your overall career satisfaction. Having worked part-time, I don't think I could really ever go back to full-time work. I really enjoy having the extra time to travel, as well as do things like produce this podcast. I hope you've been enjoying the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you love this podcast, but haven't yet left a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're listening to, please do that now. Or better yet, share this podcast with a friend. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.